Get out. You are a disgrace to this family." The words didn't feel real. They hung in the air, sharp and glittering like shards of glass, before the sound of the lashing rain outside washed them away. Have you ever been betrayed so deeply it feels like the world stopped spinning? That's where my story begins. My son Ethan stood before me, his face a mask of cold fury I didn't recognize. His hand was wrapped around the strap of my old canvas bag, the one I'd carried for 30 years, the one that held the last faded photograph of his father. He didn't just place it outside. He drew his arm back, a fluid motion of athletic cruelty, and hurled it through the open doorway. I watched it arc through the rain-slicked night, a dark bird with a broken wing, before it landed with a soft, sickening thud on the driveway. A puddle instantly began to bleed around it, soaking into the canvas, blurring the edges of my life contained within. From the corner of my eye, a small, bright light. Jessica, my daughter-in-law, was holding up her phone. Her face was illuminated by its glow, her lips curved into a serene, satisfied smile. She wasn't just watching, she was documenting, curating my humiliation for an audience I couldn't see. I could almost picture the caption forming in her mind, the cruel little hashtag she would use, #ToughLove. A performance of concern masking an act of pure malice. A giggle echoed from the grand staircase, the very staircase Robert and I had designed to curve like a gentle wave. My grandchildren, Leo and Chloe, were perched there, their faces peeking through the balusters. They weren't hiding in fear, they were spectators. Chloe, with her mother's smile, pointed a finger at me. Leo, a boy on the cusp of manhood, let out a laugh that was startlingly deep, an ugly, jarring sound in the home I had built. It was the sound of my own blood mocking my pain. "Ethan, please," I whispered. My voice was a dry leaf skittering across pavement. "It's raining. My things." He took a step toward me, his shadow swallowing me whole. He smelled of expensive cologne and something else, something metallic and cold. Indifference. "Your things?" he scoffed, his voice low and venomous. "This is my house now. You are an embarrassment, a weight we can no longer carry." Every word was a carefully placed stone, building a wall between us. The son I had raised, the boy whose scraped knees I had bandaged and whose nightmares I had soothed, was gone. In his place stood this stranger, a man carved from ice. He looked at me not as his mother, but as an inconvenience, a piece of old furniture that no longer fit the decor. Jessica lowered her phone, the recording finished. She sauntered to Ethan's side, placing a proprietary hand on his arm. "It's for the best, Ava," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "You need more care than we can provide. This is an act of love." An act of love. The phrase rattled in my skull. Was this love? The cold rain on my face, the laughter of my grandchildren, the sight of my life's mementos drowning on the asphalt? "Please," I tried again, my hand reaching out, grasping at the empty air between us. "Don't do this." Ethan's face hardened. He didn't flinch from my touch, he simply ignored it, as if I were a ghost. He placed his hand on my shoulder. It wasn't a violent push, not a shove that would leave a bruise. It was worse. It was a firm, deliberate, and final guidance, an ushering out. The pressure was gentle, yet irresistible, moving me backward over the threshold, out of the warmth and light, into the raging storm. My feet, clad only in thin slippers, met the cold, wet stone of the porch. The wind whipped a strand of wet hair across my face. For a single, frozen moment, I saw their faces framed in the doorway. Ethan, stoic and resolute. Jessica, triumphant. My grandchildren, curious and cruel. They looked like a perfect family in a portrait, and I was the blemish being cropped out. Then came the sound, a solid, definitive click, followed by the heavy thud of wood meeting frame. The door slammed shut, cutting off the light, the warmth, and the last vestiges of the life I had known. The sharp, metallic sound of the deadbolt sliding into place was the final punctuation mark. The end of the chapter, the end of me. I stood there, motionless, as the rain plastered my thin nightgown to my skin, the cold seeping deep into my bones. I didn't cry. The shock was a sheath of ice around my heart, too thick for any emotion to penetrate. I stared at the door. The oak door Robert and I had chosen, with its beveled glass panels that caught the morning sun. Tonight, they were black, reflecting only the turbulent, weeping sky. My house, my beautiful house. Every line, every angle, every window placement was a memory, a conversation, a shared dream between Robert and me. Now it was a fortress, and I was the enemy at the gate. The lights inside cast warm, inviting squares onto the drenched lawn, each one a silent testament to the life continuing on without me. I could hear the faint, muffled sound of the television, a burst of laughter. They had already moved on. I was already forgotten. My gaze drifted back to the dark, sodden lump on the driveway. My bag, my photograph of Robert, his smile now surely dissolving into a watery blur, my mother's locket, a book of poetry he had given me, small, insignificant treasures that were the entire architecture of my past, all of it, bleeding into the darkness. I was a ghost in my own story, watching the final pages of my life get washed away in a storm, and I couldn't feel a thing. My name is Ava. I am 72 years old, though some days my bones feel a century older, each one an archive of memories and aches. Before the rain, before the slamming door, and the hollow echo of my son's voice, I was an architect, not just of buildings, but of a life I built with my own 2 hands, with a heart full of love, and with a trust so absolute it became my own undoing. I lived for others. It was not a conscious choice, not a sacrifice I tallied in a ledger. It was simply the air I breathed, the rhythm of my heart. For my husband, Robert, my partner in every sense of the word, I was the quiet strength behind his bold vision. For my son, Ethan, I was the soft place to land, the endless well of patience and forgiveness. I believed this was the noblest purpose of a woman, of a mother, to be the foundation, unseen but essential, upon which the grand structures of her family's lives could be built. I trusted them with the blueprints of my soul. I never imagined they would one day use them to demolish me. The story of my life, the real story, is written in the timber and stone of a house on a quiet, tree-lined street. It was to be our masterpiece, Robert's and mine. We met in a dusty university library, 2 young idealists, hunched over the same worn copy of a book on organic architecture. He had a laugh that could fill a cathedral and hands that could coax beauty from the most stubborn materials. I had a mind for the elegant flow of space, for the way light could be a brushstroke, painting a room with warmth and life. We were 2 halves of a single design, and our love was the mortar that bound us together. For years we dreamed on paper. We'd sit at our small kitchen table, late into the night, fueled by cheap coffee and shared passion, sketching on napkins, on the backs of envelopes, on any surface that would hold our vision. We weren't just designing a house, we were crafting a vessel for a life. A life we hadn't yet lived, but could feel as surely as the grain of wood beneath our fingertips. Robert would sketch a soaring roofline, angled just so to catch the morning sun. "For you, Ava," he'd say, his voice a low rumble, "so you can have your coffee with the dawn." I would then draw the flow of the rooms, an open, circular path from the kitchen to the living room to the garden, with no harsh corners or dead ends. "For us," I'd reply, "so we never feel trapped, always connected." Every detail was a conversation, a negotiation of love. The reclaimed oak for the library shelves, because it held the stories of 100 years before our own. The floor-to-ceiling windows in the main living space, to blur the line between inside and out, to invite the seasons to be our house guests. The small, hidden alcove on the second-floor landing, just big enough for a single armchair and a good book, my secret sanctuary. The sturdy, handcrafted workbench in the garage, which was to be Robert's domain. We didn't just design it, we breathed life into it. When we finally bought the land, a gentle slope of earth dotted with old maples, we poured our life savings and every ounce of our energy into making the dream a reality. I remember the smell of fresh-cut lumber, the sharp tang of sawdust in the air that clung to our clothes and hair. I remember the weight of the hammer in my hand as I helped nail the subflooring, the satisfying thud echoing our progress. Robert, with his sleeves rolled up, his face smudged with dirt and sweat, would look over at me and smile a smile that held the whole world in it. We weren't just building a structure, we were building our future, post by beam. And then came Ethan, our beautiful boy. He was born the spring we finished the roof. I remember holding him, a tiny, perfect bundle, and walking through the unfinished rooms. The walls were still bare drywall, the floors raw plywood, but to me, it was already a palace. I stood with him in the space that would be his nursery, the afternoon light streaming through the wide window, and I whispered a promise to him. "This is all for you," I said, my voice thick with a love so fierce it was almost painful. A place of safety, a place of love, a fortress. From that day on, my focus shifted. My own architectural ambitions, the awards I had won, the career I had been building, all of it gently faded into the background. My new project was him. Raising Ethan in that house became my life's work. The house we had designed for ourselves became his kingdom. The sprawling lawn was his soccer field. The sturdy oak tree in the backyard was the perch for his first treehouse, which Robert and I designed with the same care as the main house itself. The open-plan kitchen was where I spent countless hours baking his favorite cookies, the sweet smell of chocolate and vanilla becoming the permanent scent of his childhood. I gave him everything, every ounce of my time, my energy, my love. Robert would sometimes caution me. "Ava, my love," he'd say gently, "the world won't bend to his will the way you do. We must teach him resilience." But I couldn't help it. When he fell, I was there to catch him. When he failed, I was there to soothe his bruised ego. I saw his every cry for attention as a need I had to fill, his every demand as a wish I had to grant. I was his architect of comfort, and I built him a world with no sharp edges, no hard landings. I thought I was giving him a gift. I see now I was merely failing to provide him with a spine. The years flowed by, measured in the growth rings of the backyard oak and the pencil marks on the kitchen doorframe tracking Ethan's height. The house settled into itself, a living, breathing member of our family. It held our laughter in its walls, our tears in its floorboards, our history in every scratch and scuff. It was a perfect ecosystem of love. And then, one autumn, the architect of my heart, my Robert, was gone. A sudden, cruel silence fell upon the house. The light through the windows he had designed for me suddenly seemed harsh and pale. The soaring ceilings felt vast and empty, amplifying my loneliness. The house, our shared masterpiece, became a beautiful, echoing mausoleum. For the first time, I felt utterly lost within the very walls that were meant to be my sanctuary. Ethan was grown then, a rising star in the tech world, with a sharp, ambitious wife named Jessica and 2 children of his own, Leo and Chloe. When he suggested they all move in with me, my heart, which I thought had shattered into a million irreparable pieces, felt a flicker of hope. He framed it as an act of love, of concern. "You shouldn't be alone in this huge place, Mom," he'd said, his voice laced with a synthetic sincerity I was too grief-stricken to recognize. "We'll take care of you. We'll be a family again, all under one roof." I agreed without hesitation. The thought of a child's laughter echoing through the halls again, the thought of my son nearby, it was a lifeline. I saw it as the house beginning a new chapter, fulfilling a new purpose. I willingly, gratefully, stepped back. I was ready to cede the role of matriarch, to become the gentle, doting grandmother, a quiet presence in the background. The erasure was not sudden. It was a slow, creeping rot. It began with small things, insignificant changes that felt petty to protest. Jessica, with her impeccable taste for sterile, joyless minimalism, began to redecorate. The warm, worn Persian rug in the living room, the one Robert and I had bought on our honeymoon, was replaced by a stark gray slab of fabric that felt cold underfoot. The colorful, chaotic collection of family photos on the mantelpiece vanished, replaced by a single, artfully placed glass vase holding a solitary, lifeless twig. "Just tidying up, Ava," she would say with a brittle smile, creating a more calming, modern aesthetic. My home, once a testament to a life richly lived, was being systematically stripped of its soul, of its history. It was being transformed into a showroom, a backdrop for Jessica's curated social media life. And I, the original architect, was becoming an inconvenient, outdated piece of furniture. Then they came for my legacy. I walked into the library one afternoon, my library, with the reclaimed oak shelves Robert and I had installed ourselves. And the wall where my architectural awards had hung for decades was bare. The framed certificates, the heavy, gleaming trophies, the tangible proof of my life's work before Ethan, were gone. A large, abstract painting, a chaotic slash of black and beige that gave me a headache, hung in their place. I felt a cold dread snake its way up my spine. I found the awards later, by accident, in the back of a dusty garage closet. They were piled haphazardly in a cardboard box, my name on the brass plaques, facing the damp concrete wall. I ran my fingers over one of them, the Innovator in Residential Design Award I had been so proud of. It was cold and forgotten. In that moment, I felt my own identity being packed away with them, dismissed as clutter from a bygone era. The final descent was literal. My bedroom, the master suite Robert and I had shared, the one with the balcony overlooking the garden, was the first thing they claimed. "It just makes sense, Mom," Ethan had said, refusing to meet my eyes. "It's the biggest room. We have the kids. We need the space." I didn't fight. I moved into a smaller guest room, then another, each one progressively farther from the heart of the home. The day they moved me to the basement was the day I understood I was no longer a resident. I was an inmate. Jessica had called it, creating a private apartment for me, a space of my own. The room had no windows. The walls were cold, painted a drab institutional gray. The only light came from a single bare bulb dangling from the ceiling. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and laundry detergent, and the constant low hum of the furnace and water heater was my only companion. My world, once defined by soaring ceilings and open vistas, had shrunk to a 10 by 12-foot concrete box. They placed my bed, an old lumpy mattress, against one wall and a small rickety nightstand beside it. That was it. My private apartment. From my subterranean world, I could hear the muffled sounds of the life going on above me. The thud of my grandchildren's feet as they ran through the halls, the clink of wine glasses and the shrill peals of Jessica's laughter during their dinner parties, the deep bass of the music they played late into the night. It was like listening to a broadcast from a distant planet, a life I was no longer a part of. I became a ghost, a phantom haunting the periphery of my own creation. I learned to be invisible, to move through the house like a whisper. I would wait until the dead of night, when the house was finally silent, to creep upstairs. I'd walk the familiar circular path I had designed so many years ago, my hand trailing along the walls, feeling the memory of the life that used to be there. I'd stand in the library and stare at the empty space where my achievements used to hang. I'd look out the great windows at the moonlit garden and remember planting a sapling with Robert and a tiny Ethan, our hands all together in the cool, dark soil. Sometimes, I would catch my reflection in the polished black granite of Jessica's new kitchen island. I saw a stooped, gray-haired woman with haunted eyes, her form translucent, almost unreal against the sleek, modern backdrop. I didn't recognize her. That wasn't Ava, the architect, the wife, the mother. That was a specter, a remnant of a life that had been methodically, cruelly, and completely erased. The house, my beautiful house, had become my prison. Every beam I had lovingly placed, every window I had designed to let in the light, now served to wall me in, to highlight my own obsolescence. I, who had given everything to build this fortress of love for my son, was now its forgotten prisoner, locked away in the dungeon, waiting for an end that felt both terrifyingly close and impossibly far away. My trust had been the foundation, and they had built my tomb upon it. The house breathes. I know this because I designed its lungs. I chose the exact placement of the clerestory windows in the great room to catch the morning sun, to pull its warmth across the Italian marble floors that Robert and I picked out on a trip to Carrara. The cross breezes that whisper through the hallways in the late afternoon are not an accident. They are a conversation I orchestrated between the east and west wings. Every beam, every joint, every pane of glass is a word in a love letter I wrote with my husband, a testament to a life built, not just inhabited. Now, I am a ghost in my own masterpiece. My world has shrunk to the dimensions of a forgotten closet in the basement, a space without windows, nestled between the groaning water heater and the rhythmic thump of the washing machine. It smells of damp concrete and Jessica's cloyingly sweet fabric softener. The air is thick, recycled, a stark contrast to the open, airy design of the home above. The only light comes from a single, bare bulb that hums with a weary electric sadness. This is where I live. This is where they have stored me. My life with Robert, our shared history, has been methodically erased from the floors above. My architectural awards, heavy glass and polished steel accolades that once lined the shelves of the study Robert built for me, are gone. I found them one Tuesday, not even carefully packed, but tossed in a series of black garbage bags by the side of the house, waiting for the weekly pickup. One of the heavier ones, the Pritzker nomination plaque, had cracked its glass case. I saw a sliver of my name, Ava Peterson, glinting amidst coffee grounds and eggshells. I didn't retrieve it. To do so would have been to admit to them that I had seen it, that it had wounded me. My silence is the only armor I have left. In their place, on those same hand-milled walnut shelves, now sit Jessica's acquisitions. Lifeless, mass-produced sculptures from a home decor catalog. Faux distressed picture frames holding professionally shot photos of her, Ethan, and the children, all wearing matching white linen, their smiles as bright and hollow as the frames themselves. She has transformed our home, a structure defined by light and authentic materials, into a sterile showroom. She calls it modernizing. I call it a desecration. I have become an inconvenient piece of old furniture, one they can't quite figure out how to dispose of. My presence is an odor they are constantly trying to mask. I heard Jessica on the phone with one of her friends last week, her voice a stage whisper designed to carry down the basement stairs. It's the smell, you know, the old people smell. I've got scented plugins in every single outlet, but it just lingers. After she hung up, a new, aggressively floral scent began to permeate the house, a chemical fog that burned my sinuses and made my eyes water. It was the smell of my own effacement. The days bleed into one another, each marked by a new, small cruelty, a fresh paper cut on my soul. They are masters of the subtle wound, the kind of injury that leaves no visible bruise, but festers deep inside. Mealtime is the most refined of their tortures. I can hear them upstairs. The scrape of chairs on the dining room floor, the clink of heavy silverware against the porcelain plates I bought in Portugal, the bright, tinkling laughter of the children, Leo and Chloe, the sound of a family. My meals are served later. After they have finished, it is whatever is left over, scraped onto a flimsy paper plate that grows soft and pulpy from the grease. I am not permitted in the dining room. I am not permitted a chair at the kitchen island. I am to eat in the laundry room, standing. Jessica once told Chloe, loud enough for me to hear, "We use paper plates for Grandma because her hands shake." We don't want her breaking the good china. My hands don't shake, but I picked up the cold, congealed portion of macaroni and cheese with the plastic fork they provided, and I ate it standing beside the churning washing machine, the rhythmic sloshing a pathetic soundtrack to my solitary supper. The fork was weak, bending under the weight of a single noodle. I felt a kinship with it. Ethan sees it all. He is the silent architect of this cruelty. His inaction is a form of violence more profound than Jessica's overt disdain. He walks past me as if I'm a part of the wall, his eyes fixed on the glowing screen of his phone, his mind lost in the digital world where he is a successful tech CEO, a pillar of the community, not the son who has imprisoned his mother in her own basement. His silence is his consent. It is his signature on every act of humiliation I endure. His children have learned from the best. They see me not as their grandmother, but as an object, an obstacle, a prop for their amusement. Last month, Leo, who is 12 and lives his life through the lens of his phone, discovered a new passion for creating viral videos. I was walking up the basement stairs, my hand on the railing, my breath coming in short, shallow bursts. It's a steep climb. I saw him at the top of the landing, phone held aloft, a smirk playing on his lips. As I reached the last step, he casually stuck his foot out. It wasn't a hard trip. It was calculated. Just enough to unbalance me. I fell sideways, my hip cracking against the edge of the stair with a sickening thud. A hot, sharp pain radiated through my entire side. I lay there, gasping, the world a swirl of blurry shapes. The only thing in focus was Leo, his phone still pointed at me, capturing my crumpled form. He wasn't laughing out loud. It was worse. It was a quiet, satisfied snicker. "Epic fail, Grandma," he whispered before turning and sauntering away, presumably to edit his masterpiece, to add a silly sound effect to my pain and share it with the world. Ethan was in the hallway. He saw me fall. He saw Leo's foot. He watched the entire event unfold. He paused for a moment, his thumb hovering over his screen. He looked down at me on the floor, his expression not one of concern, but of mild annoyance, as if I had spilled something he might have to step over. Then, without a word, he continued walking toward his home office and closed the door. The soft click of the latch was the sound of my heart breaking. I pulled myself up, every movement an agony, and limped back down to my windowless room. Chloe, at 10, is more subtle, a perfect apprentice to her mother. Her weapon of choice is not physical, but emotional. On my small, rickety nightstand in the basement, I keep one photograph. It is the only personal possession I have managed to keep with me. It's a picture of Robert and me, taken on the day we broke ground on this house. We are young, covered in a light dusting of dirt, our arms around each other, squinting into the sun. We are not just smiling. We are luminous with hope, with the sheer joy of creating a future together. It is my most sacred object. It is my anchor to the woman I used to be. Last week, Chloe came down to the basement, a rare occurrence. She was holding a juice box, a dark purple concoction. She said she was looking for a lost toy. She hovered near my bed, her eyes darting to the photograph. "What's that?" she asked, her voice feigning innocence. I told her it was a picture of her grandpa and me. She reached out a sticky finger to touch Robert's face on the glossy paper. And then, the accident. Her hand spasmed, squeezing the box. A jet of dark, sugary grape juice arced through the air, drenching the photograph. It soaked into the paper instantly, a deep purple stain that ran across Robert's smiling face and my own, blurring our features together in a grotesque, sticky mess. "Oops," she said, her eyes wide with mock surprise. "Mommy says I'm clumsy." She dropped the now empty juice box on the floor and ran back upstairs. A few minutes later, I heard Jessica's voice from the top of the stairs. "Ava, are you leaving your trash all over the place again? This is a house, not a landfill, and please keep your clutter to your own space. It's unsightly." Clutter. My life with Robert, my last tangible memory of his face, was clutter. The purple stain was like a bruise on the past. I tried to wipe it away, but it only smeared, turning Robert's bright eyes into dark, hollow sockets. I sat on the edge of my bed in the humming darkness, holding the ruined image. And I didn't cry. The capacity for tears had been wrung out of me, replaced by a cold, quiet resolve that was beginning to solidify in the pit of my stomach. They think they are breaking me. They chip away at me day after day with their careless words, their calculated neglect, their casual cruelty. They believe that by erasing me from the house, they can erase me from existence. They see a frail, defeated old woman in a basement. They don't see the woman who drew the blueprints for the very floors they walk on. They don't know that an architect understands structure. They don't know that an architect knows that every foundation, no matter how strong it seems, has a point of weakness. And I, the ghost in their house, the architect of this beautiful, desecrated place, I'm beginning to remember exactly where I put it. The silence in which they have shrouded me is becoming my sanctuary. It is here, in the dark, that a new blueprint is beginning to form. The room smelled of bleach and despair. It was a sterile, impersonal scent that clung to the thin, scratchy sheets and the threadbare carpet. Outside my window, a neon sign for the Starlight Motel flickered, casting a sickly pink and green glow into the darkness, a sad imitation of the celestial bodies it was named for. The relentless rain from that night had finally subsided, leaving behind a world that felt washed out and weary, the air thick with the smell of wet asphalt and decay. I felt a kinship with it. I, too, was washed out. A faint outline of a person, erased from my own life. My laptop, a relic from a decade ago, hummed precariously on the small, wobbly desk. Its fan whirred like an asthmatic breath. the only sound in the room besides the distant groan of trucks on the highway and the frantic beating of my own heart. I hadn't opened it in days. What was the point? My emails would be a ghost town, a digital monument to a life that was no longer mine. Friends from the Architectural Guild, newsletters from design museums, reminders for social events I would never attend. Ghosts, all of them. But something compelled me tonight. A flicker of defiance, perhaps. Or maybe just the crushing weight of loneliness, the need for any connection, even a digital one. My fingers, stiff with age and a sorrow that had settled deep into my bones, trembled as I typed in my password. The screen illuminated my face, showing me what I already knew. A hollow-eyed old woman, her skin as thin and fragile as parchment, her hair a silver mess. I scrolled through the usual junk mail, the automated condolences from distant acquaintances who had heard about Robert's passing years ago and set a calendar reminder. Then I saw it. An email with a subject line that made the air in my lungs freeze. Subject: for Ava. To be opened 5 years post-mortem. The sender was Robert. My Robert. My mind refused to process it. It was impossible. A cruel prank. A virus? But the sender address was his private personal account we had set up together, the one only I knew the password to. And the date? It was sent precisely on the 5-year anniversary of his death. A digital ghost, reaching out from beyond the veil. My hand shook so violently I could barely control the mouse. I clicked on it. The body of the email was stark, almost unnervingly simple. My dearest Ava, if you are reading this, it means the world has not been as kind to you as I had hoped. The clock has run out. There is a man you must see. His name is David Chen. Chen Associates. He is the best, and he is a man of his word. He holds the key. Do not let him turn you away. All my love. Forever. Robert. Below the signature was an address, a prestigious one in the heart of the city's financial district, and a single, encrypted file attachment, the final blueprint.pdf. He holds the key. The words echoed in the silent room. A key to what? The past. The future. My mind, a labyrinth of grief and shock, couldn't find a path. For 5 years, I had been navigating the fog alone. I had mourned. I had shrunk. I had allowed myself to become a guest in the masterpiece Robert and I had built, a masterpiece now controlled by the son I no longer recognized. And now, a voice from the grave was telling me there was a way out. The next morning, the city felt like a foreign country. I used the last of my emergency cash for a taxi, watching the familiar skyline unfold through the smudged window. I saw the spire of the museum I helped design, its glass facade catching the morning light like a diamond. I saw the clean, bold lines of the corporate headquarters that had won us our first major award. My fingerprints were all over this city, etched into its very bones. Yet here I was, an anonymous passenger in a yellow cab, clutching a printout of an email like it was a holy relic, on my way to beg a stranger for help. The irony was a bitter pill I had been swallowing for months. Chen Associates occupied the top 3 floors of a steel and glass tower that scraped the sky. The lobby was a symphony of beige marble, silent efficiency, and the hushed, expensive scent of success. I felt my threadbare coat and worn-out shoes like a brand. The receptionist, a young woman with a perfectly placid face, looked at me not with unkindness, but with the polite, unseeing gaze one gives to a piece of furniture that is slightly out of place. "I have an appointment with Mr. Chen," I lied, my voice sounding thin and reedy in the cavernous space. Her perfectly manicured fingers tapped on a keyboard. "I'm sorry, I don't see anything under..." What was the name? "Ava Peterson. He's expecting me. It's a personal matter, from Robert Peterson." The name Robert Peterson still held weight in this city. I saw a flicker of recognition in her eyes. She spoke quietly into her headset, and a moment later I was being led down a long, silent corridor. The carpet was so thick it swallowed the sound of my footsteps. The walls were lined with abstract art that probably cost more than my entire life savings. David Chen's office was less of a room and more of a viewing platform for the gods. A single wall of floor-to-ceiling glass offered a panoramic view of the city I had helped build. He sat behind a desk of dark, gleaming mahogany that seemed as large as my entire motel room. He was younger than I expected, with sharp eyes and a suit that was impeccably tailored. He stood when I entered, a gesture of politeness that felt entirely automatic. "Mrs. Peterson," he said, his voice smooth and professional. He did not offer his hand. "Please, have a seat. My assistant said it was a matter regarding your late husband." I sat in a leather chair that sighed as it took my weight. I felt small, ancient, a relic in this temple of modern power. I explained, my voice faltering, about the email. I slid the printout across the vast expanse of his desk. He picked it up, his expression unreadable as he scanned the words. He placed it down gently. "I see. Robert was a brilliant man. And a good friend, a long time ago. I was very sorry to hear of his passing." His condolences were as polished and empty as the desk between us. He said, "You hold the key," I whispered, the words sounding foolish and theatrical in the stark reality of this office. Chen steepled his fingers, his gaze analytical, assessing. It was the same look I'd seen from doctors delivering bad news. "Ava, may I call you Ava? Robert and I handled his estate planning many years ago. It was all very straightforward. The house, his assets, everything was to pass to you, and upon your passing, to your son, Ethan. Standard." "But Ethan, he threw me out," I said, the shame of it coloring my cheeks. "He and his wife, they took everything." He nodded slowly, a deep, weary sigh escaping his lips. "I see. Family disputes are complicated and deeply unpleasant. Ava, I'm going to be frank with you. Litigation in these matters is a brutal, protracted, and ruinously expensive process. It pits family against family. It dredges up years of resentment. It would exhaust you, emotionally and financially." He leaned forward, his voice softening into a tone of practiced empathy. "From what you're telling me, your son and his wife have possession of the house. They are living there. You are not. Any court will see that. The best course of action, in my professional opinion, would be to seek a settlement. We can draft a letter, make some inquiries. Perhaps Ethan would be willing to provide a modest stipend, help you find a comfortable apartment. It avoids a fight. It preserves what's left of the family relationship, and it provides you with security. A modest stipend, a comfortable apartment." He was offering me crumbs from the table of my own life. He saw a confused old woman, a charity case. He didn't see the architect who had poured her soul into the blueprints of that house. He didn't see the wife Robert had trusted with his final secret. "No," I said, the word a small, hard stone in the vast silence. "That is not what Robert wanted. He sent me to you. He said you have the key." Chen's professional patience was beginning to fray. "Ava, I admire your loyalty to your husband's memory, but I am a pragmatist. I deal in law, in evidence. What evidence do you have? What legal standing?" "I am the owner of that house," I insisted, my voice gaining a desperate strength. He held up a hand. "Are you? Did you sign anything for your son in the past few years?" "Any documents at all?" His question was a clinical probe, but it pierced through me like a shard of ice. A memory surfaced, hazy and wrapped in the cotton wool of pain. It was about a year ago. I had slipped on a rug Jessica had left at the top of the basement stairs. The fall had fractured my hip. The days that followed were a blur of pain, medication, and disorientation. I remembered Ethan at my bedside in the small, dark basement room. He was so solicitous, so full of concern. His face was a mask of filial piety. "Mom," he had said, his voice gentle, "the insurance is being a nightmare. The hospital needs all this paperwork sorted out. It's just some standard forms so I can handle the billing and make sure everything's taken care of for you. You shouldn't have to worry about this stuff while you're recovering." He had a stack of papers. He'd flipped through them quickly, pointing. "Sign here and here. Just standard medical authorizations." I was on powerful painkillers, the world swimming in and out of focus. I trusted him. He was my son. I saw the loving boy I had raised, not the cold man he had become. I had signed where he pointed, my signature, a weak, spidery scrawl. I recounted this to Chen, my voice thick with the fresh horror of the memory. He listened, his face grim. He made a few calls. The tapping of his keyboard was the sound of nails being hammered into my coffin. Finally, he swiveled his chair back to face me. The practiced empathy was gone. In its place was the dispassionate finality of a judge. He was clever, Ava. I'll give him that. It wasn't medical forms. You signed a durable power of attorney, a comprehensive one. You granted Ethan full and total authority over all of your assets and legal affairs. The house, your bank accounts, your investments. Everything. Legally, Ava. You don't own anything anymore. He does. Your signature is on the document, properly notarized. There's no key because there's no lock to open. Your son has already walked through the door and bolted it from the other side. The glass wall behind him seemed to melt away. The city skyline tilted, the buildings leaning in, ready to crush me. The air in the office was too thin to breathe. He was right. It was over. I had not only been thrown out of my home, I had willingly signed the eviction notice myself. I had handed my son the very weapon he used to destroy me. I don't remember leaving his office. I don't remember the elevator ride down or the walk through the marble lobby. My next clear memory is of being back in the motel room. The sickly neon sign was still flickering. The room still smelled of bleach. Nothing had changed, but everything was lost. The weight of Chen's words pressed down on me, forcing the air from my lungs. But beneath the despair was something else, something heavier and more ancient: guilt. The lawyer had called Ethan clever, but I knew the truth. I had laid the foundation for this betrayal decades ago. I was the architect of my own ruin. My mind drifted back, unspooling memories I had kept locked away. I saw Ethan as a boy of 10, his face screwed up in a tantrum in the middle of a department store. He wanted a ridiculously expensive remote-controlled car, one far beyond our budget at the time. Robert had said no, firmly but kindly. You don't earn things by screaming for them, son. But I couldn't bear to see him unhappy. Later that week, I went back and bought it for him, telling him it was our secret. I remember the triumphant, knowing look in his eyes. It wasn't gratitude. It was victory. I had taught him that rules were for other people, that his mother could be manipulated. I saw him in high school, after he'd been caught cheating on a final exam. The principal called us in. Robert was stern, talking about integrity, about consequences. He wanted Ethan to face the suspension, to learn from it, but I interceded. I spoke to the principal privately, framing it as a cry for help, a moment of immense pressure. I donated a significant sum to the school's library fund. The problem vanished. I had taught him that money and influence could erase any mistake. There were no consequences, only solutions you could buy. I saw him in his 20s, full of grand ideas for a tech startup. Robert, a meticulous planner, had reviewed his proposal and found it full of holes, a foundation of sand. He advised caution, more research, a smaller-scale start. Ethan had accused his father of being jealous, of trying to hold him back. And I, wanting to be the supportive mother, wanting to believe in my son's brilliance, mortgaged a portion of our savings to fund his dream. The company folded in less than a year, the money gone. Ethan never apologized. He blamed the market, his partners, his father's lack of faith. He never once blamed himself. And I never made him. I had taught him that he was never accountable. Each memory was a brick in the wall of my current prison. I had pampered him, protected him from every harsh reality, smoothed over every consequence. I had loved him not wisely, but too well. I had loved the idea of him, the perfect son, and in doing so, I had starved the man he could have been of the oxygen of responsibility. The monster who had cast his own mother out into the rain wasn't a stranger. He was a creature of my own making. And Jessica, she was just a predator who had recognized another of her kind. A wave of utter hopelessness washed over me. What right did I have to fight? What ground did I have to stand on? Chen was right. I should take the settlement, if Ethan would even offer one. I should find a small, quiet room somewhere and wait for the end. My legacy wasn't in the buildings I had designed. It was in the character of the son I had failed. I sat there for hours as the day faded outside my window. The room grew dark, but I didn't turn on a light. The flickering neon was enough. It painted stripes of pink and green across the rumpled bedspread, across my trembling hands. This was it. The end of the line. Starlight Motel. A final, cruel joke. My gaze fell upon the laptop, still open on the desk. The screen glowed faintly. Robert's email was still there. He holds the key. Do not let him turn you away. A fool's errand, a dead man's futile hope. And yet, my eyes were drawn to the attachment. The final blueprint PDF. It was still there, a digital ghost in the machine. Chen had dismissed it all, but he had never even asked about the file. Why encrypt it? Why call it a blueprint? Robert was a man of precision. Every line he drew, every word he wrote had a purpose. There was no flourish without function. My fingers, moving as if with a will of their own, guided the cursor over the attachment. I clicked. A password prompt appeared. A new wall. Of course. What could it be? My mind was a fog. I tried the obvious things. His birthday, my birthday, our anniversary. Access denied. Ethan's birthday. Access denied. The name of his first dog. Access denied. I slumped back in my chair, defeated. It was another dead end. Just another reminder of the chasm between the living and the dead, between what is and what could have been. I was about to close the laptop to surrender to the darkness when a phrase from his email surfaced in my mind. All my love, forever. It wasn't just a sign-off. Robert was never that sentimental in writing. It was a clue. I thought back, digging through the layers of my memory, past the pain and the grief, to a time before, a time of beginnings. We were young, standing on a windy bluff overlooking the ocean, the very spot where our house would one day stand. He had just proposed. He hadn't used a ring. He'd used a compass. He'd handed it to me and said, "So you can always find your way back to me. You're my true north." It was a silly, romantic gesture. Later, when we were designing our first project together, a small coastal library, he had secretly engraved the coordinates of that spot onto the cornerstone. Our secret. Our forever. My hands were shaking again, but this time with a different energy. It wasn't fear. It was a fragile, electric current of hope. I typed in the long string of numbers, the degrees, minutes, and seconds of that sacred place. I pressed enter. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the prompt vanished. The PDF opened. It wasn't a legal document. It wasn't a deed or a will. It was a letter. In Robert's own hand, scanned and preserved. His familiar, angular handwriting filled the page. My dearest Ava, if you are reading this, then my greatest fear has come to pass. I am gone, and you are alone. And I fear Ethan has not become the man I hoped he would be. I saw the seeds of it, Ava. The entitlement, the lack of empathy. I tried to temper it, and you tried to love it out of him. I pray your way was the right way, but I have always been a man who believes in contingency plans. I have loved you more than this world. The house we built was not just wood and stone. It was a testament to that love. I could never bear the thought of you being cast out of it. It is your sanctuary, your masterpiece. David Chen is a good man, but he is a creature of law and logic. He will see an old woman and a difficult case. He will not see the brilliant, unbreakable woman I married. He will advise you to settle. He will tell you it is hopeless. He will not, unless prompted, remember the promise he made to me. You must prompt him, Ava. The power of attorney was a possibility I foresaw. Ethan has his mother's charm when he wishes to use it. But the foundation I laid is deeper than any document he could trick you into signing. When you see Chen again, do not plead, do not beg. Look him in the eye and ask him about the St. Jude's contingency. Say those exact words. It was our code. For a lost cause. He will know what it means. He will remember the true final blueprint. The key is not a document, my love. It has always been you, your strength, your story. Now, go and reclaim our home. All my love, forever, Robert." The tears that fell onto the keyboard were not tears of sorrow or despair. They were tears of profound, aching love. He had seen it. He had known, all those years ago. He had known the potential darkness in our son, and he had built me a lifeboat. He hadn't just left me a memory, he had left me a weapon. St. Jude's Contingency, the patron saint of lost causes. A tremor went through me, a seismic shift deep in my soul. The grief and guilt that had paralyzed me began to recede, replaced by something I hadn't felt in a very long time. A cold, quiet, and righteous anger. The trembling in my hands stilled. My fingers, which had felt so old and useless, now rested on the keyboard with a newfound purpose. The architect was about to draw one last blueprint. Not of a house, but of a reckoning. The silence of the motel room was a different kind of silence from the one I had grown used to in the basement. Down there, the quiet was heavy, thick with the weight of the house above me, the muffled sounds of a life I was no longer part of. Here, the silence was thin, cheap. It was punctuated by the rattle of an ancient air conditioner and the distant wail of a siren, a constant reminder that I was unmoored, adrift in a city I no longer recognized as my own. For 3 days, I had done little more than stare at the water-stained ceiling, a pale imitation of a sky. My body ached, a deep, cellular pain that had nothing to do with the lumpy mattress and everything to do with the cold, hard impact of my son's hand against my shoulder as he shoved me into the rain. My world had been reduced to these 4 peeling walls, the smell of stale cigarette smoke and bleach, the vibrant tapestry of my life, the rich textures of the home Robert and I had woven from glass and steel and love, had been unraveled and replaced with this threadbare blanket of despair. I would close my eyes and see the grand staircase, its balustrade flowing like a frozen river, and then open them to the sight of a cockroach skittering across the grimy linoleum. The whiplash was a physical blow. Grief was an old, familiar coat, but this new humiliation was a raw, open wound. It wasn't just Ethan's cruelty or Jessica's smug, vapid viciousness. It was the laughter of my grandchildren, Leo and Chloe. I had read them stories, bandaged their scraped knees, celebrated their birthdays with cakes I baked from scratch in a kitchen that was now forbidden territory. Their laughter, echoing down the stairs as I begged for a shred of dignity, was the cruelest cut of all. It severed the last, fraying cord of hope I had been clinging to. On the 4th morning, as a weak, gray light filtered through the grimy window, my cheap, prepaid phone buzzed on the nightstand. An email notification. I rarely received emails anymore. My world had shrunk to the point where digital communication was almost obsolete. I expected it to be spam, an offer for a miracle cure, or an inheritance from a long-lost Nigerian prince. But the sender's name made my breath catch in my throat. Robert Peterson. It was impossible. Robert had been gone for 5 years, 1 month and 12 days. My fingers trembled as I tapped the screen. The subject line was stark, simple, for Ava. The email itself was brief, devoid of the warmth and poetry that had filled his letters to me when we were young. It was the voice of Robert, the architect, the pragmatist, the man who planned for every contingency. My dearest Ava. If you are reading this, it means 5 years have passed since my departure, and certain conditions I feared might come to pass have. Do not despair. I have always been, and will always be, your protector. There is one final blueprint I left behind. Go to the law offices of Chen Associates. Ask for David Chen. Tell him you have come for the key. He will understand. Do not discuss this with anyone else. Trust him. Trust the plan. Yours, always, Robert. The words swam before my eyes, a key, a plan, a message from beyond the grave. It felt like a fever dream, a hallucination brought on by stress and cheap medication. But the phone was solid in my hand, The email was real. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, a tiny, fragile seed of something other than despair began to germinate in the barren soil of my heart. It was not hope, not yet. It was something more fundamental: purpose. The offices of Chen Associates were in a sleek glass tower downtown, a world away from my dingy motel. The air inside smelled of expensive leather and quiet confidence. A young receptionist with an impeccably polite smile guided me to a corner office with a panoramic view of the city. David Chen was younger than I expected, perhaps in his late 40s, with a sharp suit and an even sharper gaze. He looked at me, at my worn coat and the tremor in my hands, and his expression settled into one of professional pity. It was a look I was becoming accustomed to. "Mrs. Peterson," he said, his voice smooth and measured. "Please, have a seat. My assistant said your matter was urgent." I sat, my back ramrod straight in the plush leather chair. "My husband, Robert Peterson, sent me." I felt a fool saying it, like a child claiming to have spoken to a ghost. Chen's brow furrowed slightly. "Robert? I'm sorry, I was not aware. I handled the probate for his estate 5 years ago. A brilliant man." "He sent me an email," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "He told me to come here. He said, to tell you I've come for the key." David Chen leaned back, steepling his fingers. The look of pity deepened, now mixed with concern. "Mrs. Peterson, Ava, grief can manifest in many ways. It's not uncommon for—" "I am not grieving," I interrupted, my voice finding a sliver of its old strength. "I am displaced. My son has thrown me out of my home." He nodded slowly, his expression unchanging. "I see. And you believe Robert anticipated this?" "Robert anticipated everything," I said. "The key, Mr. Chen. He said you would understand." A long silence stretched between us. He was assessing me, I realized. Weighing my credibility, my sanity. He saw a frail, elderly woman, disheveled and distraught, clutching at a fantasy. He saw a sad, simple family dispute that would be best resolved with a quiet, dignified surrender. "Ava," he said, his tone gentle, patronizing. "Cases like this, they are emotionally taxing. A long, drawn-out legal battle would be grueling for you. Often, the best path forward is mediation. We can reach out to your son, perhaps negotiate a settlement, a stipend, find you a comfortable assisted living facility. It would spare you the stress of a trial." He was already managing my defeat. He was planning my retreat. The seed of purpose inside me withered slightly. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was a foolish old woman chasing ghosts. What strength did I have left to fight? "He made me sign papers," I murmured, the memory surfacing like a shard of glass in my mind. "A few years ago, I had a bad fall. Broke my hip. I was on so many painkillers. Ethan said they were just routine papers for managing my expenses, to make things easier for me. He said he was protecting me." I looked up at Chen, the full weight of my own naivete crushing me. I trusted him. Chen's expression sharpened. The pity was replaced by a flicker of professional interest. "A power of attorney?" I nodded numbly. "General? Durable?" "I don't know. The papers were thick. My head was so foggy, I signed where he told me to sign." Chen let out a slow, quiet breath. "Well," he said, the finality in his voice like a gavel's strike, "that does complicate matters significantly. If he holds a durable power of attorney, he has broad legal authority over your assets, including potentially the authority to act on your behalf regarding the property." He was telling me it was over. Ethan had not just thrown me out. He had methodically and legally stripped me of my own life, brick by brick, while I was too clouded by pain and trust to notice. The house was his. The money was his. My life was his to dispose of. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. It wasn't a snap. It was a slow, tectonic realignment. The dawning, sickening realization wasn't just about Ethan's betrayal. It was about my own complicity. I saw him as a boy, demanding the most expensive toy, and I, wanting to see him happy, had always given in. I saw him as a teenager, wrecking his first car, and Robert and I, wanting to shield him from consequences, had simply bought him a new one. I saw every tantrum we placated, every failure we excused, every shortcut we allowed. We hadn't been raising a son. We had been cultivating a tyrant. We had laid the foundation for the man who now stood on our legacy and spat on his own mother. The pain of that truth was colder and sharper than any insult Jessica could devise. This wasn't just about getting my house back. It was about rectifying a lifetime of mistakes. It was about honoring the man Robert was, not the monster I had helped create. I met David Chen's gaze. The tremor in my hands had stopped. My voice, when I spoke, was low and clear, devoid of the quavering emotion he expected. Mr. Chen, my husband did not build a fortress just to have its keys handed over to the invaders. He was the most meticulous man I have ever known. He built fail-safes into his designs, redundancies for his redundancies. He would not have left me defenseless. He told me you had the key. I am not here to negotiate a comfortable surrender. I am here to find it. I will not be managed into a nursing home while my son sells my life's work to fund a vacation in the Maldives. I will burn it all to the ground before I let that happen. The air in the room changed. David Chen stared at me, truly seeing me for the first time. He wasn't looking at a victim anymore. He was looking at a client, the architect of his own masterpiece, ready to go to war for it. He leaned forward, a slow smile spreading across his face. It was not a smile of pity, but one of intrigue. The Maldives, you say? He tapped a button on his desk intercom. Maya, could you come in here, please, and bring the Peterson Trust file, the sealed one. A young woman entered the office. She was the polar opposite of the polished receptionist. Sharp, energetic, with an intelligent fire in her eyes, a laptop tucked under her arm like an extension of her own body. Maya, this is Ava Peterson, Chen said, his tone now one of a collaborator. Mrs. Peterson, this is Maya. She's the best tech forensics paralegal in the city. If your son and his wife have left a digital footprint, Maya will find it. Maya gave me a firm, respectful nod. A pleasure, Mrs. Peterson. As Chen retrieved a thick, dust-covered binder from a locked cabinet, I felt the balance of power shift. I was no longer a supplicant. I was the center of a newly formed alliance. First things first, Chen said, his voice now crisp and strategic. We need them to remain complacent. They believe you are broken, defeated. We must encourage that belief. An idea, cold and clear as glass, formed in my mind. I'll call him, I said. Maya and Chen both looked at me. I will call Ethan, I repeated. I will cry. I will beg him to let me come home. I will tell him I'll do anything. I will be the pathetic old woman he thinks I am. A flicker of admiration crossed Chen's face. Excellent, he said. Maya, I want you to record the call. We'll put it on speaker. That evening, from the sterile quiet of Chen's office, I made the call. Maya set up the recording equipment with swift, silent efficiency. I took a deep breath, summoning the memory of the rain, the sting of the pavement on my knees, the sound of my grandchildren's laughter. The tears that came were real, but the desperation in my voice was a performance. Ethan? I said, my voice cracking perfectly. It's Mom. The silence on the other end was heavy, annoyed. What do you want? He finally grunted. Please, Ethan, I sobbed, letting the sound catch in my throat. I'm sorry. Whatever I did, I'm so sorry. I can't live like this. I have nowhere to go. Please, just let me come back. I'll stay in the basement. I won't be any trouble. You won't even know I'm there. I could hear Jessica's muffled, triumphant whisper in the background. See? I told you she'd come crawling back. Ethan's voice was cold, devoid of any emotion. It's too late for that. You made your choice when you decided to be such a burden. We're moving on. You should too. But where will I go? I pleaded, playing my role to the hilt. I have nothing. That sounds like a you problem, not a me problem, he said, and the line went dead. I hung up the phone, my face still wet with tears, but my heart was a block of ice. Inside, I felt a grim satisfaction. The hook was set. They believed I was neutralized, a problem that had solved itself. Perfect, Chen said softly, his eyes gleaming. They're arrogant, they're overconfident, and they're about to get very, very careless. Over the next week, Chen's office became my command center. While I stayed out of sight in a slightly better, but still anonymous extended stay hotel that Chen had arranged, Maya went to work. She was a digital archaeologist, and my family's life was her excavation site. I watched, fascinated, as she moved through the digital world with the grace of a concert pianist. A few clicks, and Jessica's entire social media history was laid bare on a large monitor. We scrolled through years of posts, but focused on the last few months. There it was, the post from the night I was thrown out, a picture of my soaked luggage on the curb, the front door of my own home ominously dark behind it. The caption, "Sometimes you have to practice #tough love for their own good, making the hard choices." The comments underneath were a sickening mix of praise for her strength and pity for her difficult situation. "We'll save all of this," Maya said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Every post, every comment, every single like. It establishes a public pattern of malicious intent and emotional abuse. Next, she delved into financial records. With the information I provided about my pharmacy, she made a few discreet inquiries. Within an hour, she had the records. There, in black and white, was the evidence of Jessica switching my cardiologist-prescribed heart medication for a cheaper generic brand 3 months prior, citing cost-saving measures to the pharmacist. An action taken without my consent or my doctor's approval. "This is more than cruel," Chen murmured, looking at the printout. "This is endangerment. A jury would not look kindly on this." Then came my bank accounts, the ones Ethan had managed for me under the power of attorney. Maya pulled up the statements. It was a river of red. Large, consistent withdrawals, month after month, transferred directly into an account belonging to Ethan. Thousands of dollars siphoned away. And then she found the other side of the transaction. Corresponding expenditures on Ethan and Jessica's credit cards. A $5,000 watch for him, a $3,000 handbag for her, reservations for a couple's spa weekend that cost more than my entire monthly pension. And there, pending, was the most damning charge of all. A deposit for a 2-week, all-inclusive stay at a 5-star resort in the Maldives. The vacation I had overheard them planning, each piece of evidence was a brick, and Maya was building a fortress of her own around them, a fortress of irrefutable fact. Finally, after days of meticulous preparation, Chen placed the thick, sealed binder on the conference table in front of me. The words stamped on the cover in gold foil read, "The Robert Peterson Residential Trust." "This," Chen said, his voice low with reverence, "is the key. It's not a key to a door, Ava. It's the key to everything." He opened the binder. The pages were filled with dense legal language, but he guided me through it, translating the complex clauses into a simple, devastating narrative. "Robert created this trust the year before he passed," Chen explained. "He placed the house, the property itself, into it. According to this document, you, Ava Peterson, are the sole lifetime beneficiary. This means you have the exclusive and non-transferable right to live in that house, comfortably and without interference, for the rest of your natural life." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Ethan is named as the remainder beneficiary. He inherits the house only upon your passing. Until then, legally, he is nothing more than a guest in your home." My breath hitched. "But the power of attorney I signed." "Irrelevant," Chen said with a sharp smile. "You cannot give away something you do not technically own. You are the beneficiary, but the trust is the legal owner. The power of attorney gives Ethan control over your personal assets, the money he has been stealing, but it gives him zero authority over the trust's assets. He cannot sell the house, he cannot borrow against it, and he certainly cannot evict the lifetime beneficiary." Tears welled in my eyes, but these were not tears of sorrow. And they were tears of overwhelming gratitude for the man I had loved, for his foresight, his fierce, unending need to protect me, even from beyond the grave. But that's not the genius of it, Ava, Chen continued, his eyes gleaming. He turned a page, his finger landing on a specific clause. This is Robert's masterpiece. He called it the moral stewardship provision. I call it the ethics clause. He slid the document closer to me. It states, he read aloud, that should the lifetime beneficiary, Ava Peterson, be removed from the residence against her will, or be subjected to abuse, neglect, or mistreatment that jeopardizes her physical or emotional well-being, as determined by the trustee, that's me, then the remainder beneficiary, Ethan Peterson, shall be immediately and irrevocably disinherited. I stared at him, my mind struggling to grasp the full implication. It gets better, Chen said, barely containing his excitement. The clause goes on to state that in the event of such a breach, full title and ownership of the trust's assets, the entire $12 million property, will be immediately transferred to a charitable organization. He looked up at me, his smile broadening. An organization of the lifetime beneficiary's choosing. The room fell silent. The hum of the city outside faded away. In that moment, I could feel Robert's presence beside me, a steady, reassuring weight. He hadn't just built me a fortress, he had handed me a sword, a cannon. He had designed the perfect, inescapable trap, baited with his own son's greed. Ethan hadn't just thrown me out of my home. He had, with his own hands, signed away his inheritance, his future, and the very foundation of his life. He just didn't know it yet. I looked from the legal document to the pile of evidence Maya had compiled, to the determined faces of my new allies. The fear that had lived in my bones for months had vanished, burned away by a cold, quiet, and righteous fury. I was no longer a victim cowering in a motel room. I was an architect, and I was about to draw up the blueprints for my son's reckoning. The ride over was a blur of familiar streets that felt alien. Each turn brought a fresh wave of nausea, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. The manicured lawns, the majestic oak trees I had watched grow for decades, they all seemed to be judging me, witnesses to my humiliation. I sat in the passenger seat of David Chen's immaculate sedan, my hands clenched so tightly in my lap, my knuckles were white mountains on a frail, wrinkled landscape. The fabric of my best coat, a simple navy wool I'd kept for special occasions, felt like a costume for a part I never wanted to play. "Are you ready, Ava?" David's voice was calm, a steady anchor in my swirling sea of anxiety. He wasn't looking at me, his eyes focused on the road, but I could feel his quiet solidarity. It was more than professional, it was human. I could only manage a nod, my throat too tight for words. Ready? Was a lamb ever ready for the slaughter? But then, a spark of something else ignited deep within me, something hard and unyielding. I wasn't a lamb. I was the architect. I had designed the abattoir. "They won't be expecting us," he continued, as if reading my thoughts. "They believe you are broken. They believe you are a non-entity, a problem that has been solved. Their arrogance is their greatest vulnerability. Your silence, Ava, will be your greatest strength. Let me handle the legal framework. You just observe, remember who you are." He pulled the car to a smooth stop a few houses down from my own. From here, I could see it, my home. It stood proud against the afternoon sky, a testament to Robert's vision and my meticulous design. Sunlight glinted off the large pane windows we had so carefully positioned to catch the morning light. But it was tainted. A sleek, black German SUV, Ethan's, was parked in the driveway next to a flamboyant red sports car that could only belong to Jessica. And there was a third car, a discreet but expensive-looking sedan with a real estate company's logo subtly displayed on the side. They were moving faster than I'd imagined. The thought sent a jolt of ice through my veins, extinguishing the last embers of my fear and replacing it with a cold, hard resolve. We walked up the stone pathway, my sensible shoes making a soft, determined sound against the slate. David's polished dress shoes were a silent counterpoint. Every fiber of my being screamed that I didn't belong here anymore, that I was a ghost haunting my own life, but I forced myself to straighten my back, to lift my chin. David had told me to remember who I was. I was Ava Peterson, and this was my goddamn house. He didn't ring the bell. He simply turned the handle, The heavy oak door, the one I'd sketched on a napkin in a small Italian cafe 50 years ago, swung open with a familiar, weighty groan. The sound of laughter and cheerful chatter spilled out from the main living area. It was a bright, commercial sound, completely alien to the warm, familial echoes I held in my memory. We stepped inside, and the air was thick with the scent of Jessica's expensive, cloying perfume and the sharp, sterile smell of a recent deep cleaning. My scent, the faint, comfortable aroma of old books, Earl Grey tea, and lavender, had been completely erased. We followed the voices into the great room, and there they were. Ethan, looking every bit the successful tech CEO in a tailored blazer, was smiling, his arm draped possessively around Jessica's shoulders. She was a vision in a cream-colored silk dress, her smile wide and predatory as she talked to a well-dressed man in a suit, the real estate broker. A sleek, glossy brochure lay open on the marble coffee table, my coffee table, displaying professional photos of my home under the bold heading, "For sale, a $12 million modernist masterpiece." The laughter died the moment Jessica saw me. Her smile didn't just vanish. It was violently ripped from her face, replaced by a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. Her perfectly manicured hand flew to her throat. Ethan followed her gaze. His face went through a rapid series of micro-expressions, confusion, then irritation, then a flash of genuine alarm, before settling into a cold, dismissive glare. "Mother," he said, the word a blade. "What are you doing here? You're trespassing." The broker, a man named Marcus according to his name tag, looked between us, his professional smile faltering. "Is there a problem, Ethan?" Before Ethan could answer, David Chen stepped forward, moving with an unhurried grace that commanded the room. He was no longer just a kind lawyer. He was a force. "Good afternoon," David said, his voice polite but firm, cutting through the tension. "My name is David Chen. I am legal counsel for Mrs. Ava Peterson, the owner of this property." Ethan let out a short, contemptuous laugh. "Owner? I think you'll find the paperwork says otherwise. She signed over power of attorney. This is my house now. Now get her out of here before I call the police." Jessica, recovering her composure, adopted a look of saccharine concern. "Mother, please, don't make a scene. This is so embarrassing for everyone." David ignored them both, his attention fixed on the broker. "Mr. Marcus, I apologize for the interruption, but I feel it is my duty to inform you that this property is not and cannot be for sale." Marcus looked at Ethan confused. "Ethan, what's he talking about?" "He's talking nonsense," Ethan snapped, his face flushing with anger. "He's some ambulance chaser my mother found. Don't listen to him." "We have the legal right." "The right you have," David said, his voice dropping slightly, becoming more serious, "is based on a document signed under duress while my client was heavily medicated, a point we are more than prepared to argue in court. However, that is not the primary issue here." He reached into his leather briefcase and pulled out a single, beautifully bound document. He didn't hand it to Ethan. He placed it gently on the coffee table, next to their garish sales brochure. The contrast was stark. One represented a cheap, hasty grab for cash, the other a lifetime of planning. "This," David announced to the silent room, "is the controlling legal instrument for this property. It is the Robert Peterson Special Personal Residence Trust, established by Mrs. Peterson's late husband." Ethan scoffed. "A trust? So what? I'm the beneficiary. It passes to me. It's my house." "Not exactly," David said, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. "You are indeed the remainder beneficiary, Ethan. You are designated to inherit the property upon your mother's passing, but the trust names only one lifetime beneficiary." He turned his gaze slowly, deliberately, to me. "Your mother, Ava Peterson. She, and she alone, holds the exclusive right to occupy and control this residence for the entire duration of her natural life." The silence in the room was absolute. It was so profound, I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Jessica's face was a canvas of disbelief, her painted lips slightly parted. The broker, Marcus, was already beginning to edge towards the door, his eyes wide. He recognized the smell of a legal disaster. "This is ridiculous," Ethan sputtered, though the bravado was gone from his voice, replaced by a thin, reedy panic. "This changes nothing. We can manage the trust." "Ah," David said, holding up a single finger. "But this is where your late father's genius truly shines." You see, Robert was a brilliant man. He was an architect not just of buildings, but of protections. He included a very specific, very binding clause in the trust. You could call it a morality clause. He let the words hang in the air. I watched as the color drained from Ethan's face. He knew. In that instant, he knew he was trapped. David continued, his voice as sharp and precise as a surgeon's scalpel. The clause states in unequivocal terms that should the lifetime beneficiary, Ava Peterson, be involuntarily removed from the residence or be subjected to treatment that a reasonable person would deem neglectful or abusive, the trust is immediately and irrevocably altered. He paused, letting the full weight of his next words land. In such an event, your status as remainder beneficiary is terminated. Permanently. And the full ownership of the property, free and clear, is to be transferred to a charitable organization of Ava's choosing. Marcus, the broker, didn't need to hear another word. He snatched his brochure off the table, gave a clipped, horrified nod, and practically ran from the room. The sound of the heavy oak door closing behind him echoed like a gunshot. Ethan stared at David, his mouth opening and closing silently, like a fish gasping for air. Jessica looked at him, her eyes wide with frantic, unspoken questions. The $12 million dream had just evaporated before her eyes. You can't prove that," Ethan finally managed to say, his voice a hoarse whisper. "It's her word against mine." "Is it?" I said. It was the first time I had spoken. My voice was quiet, but it seemed to shake the very foundations of the room. I looked at Jessica, at her phone still clutched in her hand. "You filmed it, Jessica." "You filmed my son throwing my bags onto the street in the pouring rain. You even gave it a hashtag. Tough love. I believe that constitutes involuntary removal, don't you, David?" David simply nodded, his expression grim. Ethan's face contorted into a mask of pure rage. The fear was gone, replaced by the cornered fury of a predator. "You think you've won?" he snarled, taking a step towards me. "I will drag you through the courts for years. I'll bleed you dry. I'll prove you're incompetent, senile. I will destroy you. I will destroy his legacy." He gestured wildly around the room at the house his father had built. "I wouldn't threaten that if I were you, Ethan," David said, his tone shifting from legal precision to something much colder. "Because we haven't gotten to your father's legacy yet." Ethan stopped, confused. "What are you talking about?" "This house is a masterpiece," David said, his eyes sweeping the room. "But it is built on a foundation that is, let's say, compromised. Robert was a brilliant man, but he was also ambitious in his youth. The parcel of land this house sits on, it was acquired through a series of transactions that were, to put it mildly, legally questionable. A shell corporation, a rezoning appeal based on falsified environmental reports. It was a very long time ago. The statute of limitations has long since passed for any criminal proceedings." He paused, looking directly at Ethan. "But for a public relations nightmare, for the story of how the celebrated Robert Peterson built his family's fortune on a fraudulent land deal, there is no statute of limitations on that. I wonder how the board of directors at your tech company would feel about that story breaking. The story of a son who not only abuses his elderly mother, but whose entire inheritance, whose entire platform of success is rooted in his father's foundational crime." Ethan stood frozen, utterly poleaxed. This was a blow he had never anticipated. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about his name, his identity, the carefully constructed myth of the Peterson legacy. The one he had built his entire life upon was a house of cards, and David Chen was holding a lit match. He swayed on his feet, looking from David to me. His face was a wreck of conflicting emotions, hatred, fear, and a dawning, sickening understanding of his own monumental miscalculation. And then I saw Jessica. Her face was no longer panicked. It was calculating. I saw the gears turning in her mind. The house was gone. The inheritance was a toxic asset. She looked at her husband, at this broken, defeated man, and I knew exactly what she was thinking. Her loyalty was only to the money, and the money was gone. It was time for the final piece. I reached into my coat pocket and took out a small, simple digital audio recorder. I didn't say a word. I just held it up and pressed the play button. The room, already heavy with a suffocating silence, was suddenly filled with Jessica's voice. It was a recording of a phone call, clear as a bell. "Oh my God, Brenda, you have no idea. As soon as the sale goes through and that 12 mil hits our account, I am done. I've already talked to my lawyer. With the house sold, half of that is mine. Clean and simple. I can't stand him anymore. Him and his miserable old mother. I'll take my 6 million and be on a beach in Bali before he even knows what hit him." The recording clicked off. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't just quiet. It was dead. It was the silence of a tomb. I watched as Ethan slowly, very slowly, turned his head to look at his wife. The look in his eyes was not anger. It wasn't even hatred. It was something far worse. It was the hollow, vacant look of a man who has just realized that every single thing in his life was a lie. The woman he had chosen, the partner he had conspired with to betray his own mother, had been planning to betray him all along. Their shared cruelty, their bond of greed, it was all a sham. He was just another mark to her. Her face, for the first time, crumpled in genuine terror. She saw that look in his eyes and knew. The empire they had built together on a foundation of lies had just imploded, and they were both standing in the rubble, looking at each other as complete and utter strangers. And I, the ghost they had tried to exorcise, was the only one left standing. The silence in the living room was a physical thing, a heavy blanket smothering the echoes of my husband's legacy and my lawyer's calm, devastating pronouncements. The high-end real estate broker had vanished so quickly it was as if he'd been a mirage, leaving behind only the scent of his expensive cologne and the ghost of a $12 million deal. Ethan and Jessica stood frozen, two statues carved from greed and disbelief. The documents Mr. Chen held were not just paper. They were the final stones in a wall they had built around themselves, a wall that had just collapsed inward. Ethan's face, usually a mask of smug entitlement, was a ruin. The color drained from it, leaving a pasty, mottled canvas of shock and rising fury. Jessica was different. I could see the frantic calculations whirring behind her eyes, her mind a frantic abacus trying to find an angle, a loophole, a way out. She looked at Ethan, not with sympathy, but with the cold assessment of a partner whose business venture had just imploded. The recording of her betrayal, her plan to divorce him and take half, hung in the air between them, more toxic than any poison. The look he turned on her was no longer that of a husband. It was the look of a man staring at his executioner. I felt Mr. Chen's presence beside me, a bastion of quiet strength. He didn't need to speak. The moment was mine. I took a slow breath, the air in my own home finally feeling like it belonged to me. My voice, when it came, was not the trembling plea of the woman they had thrown into the rain. It was quiet, steady, and as unyielding as the granite countertops Robert and I had chosen together so many years ago. 24 hours, I said. The words fell into the silence, each one a perfectly placed stone. You will pack your personal belongings, your clothes. You will take your cars. Everything else stays. Ethan's head snapped toward me, his eyes blazing with a desperate, cornered rage. "You can't do this," he hissed, the words barely more than a raw whisper. "This is my home. I am your son." "My son," I repeated, and the words tasted like ash. My son watched his wife switch my heart medication for a cheaper generic to save a few dollars for a vacation. My son watched his children trip me for a social media video. My son threw his mother's life onto the street in a storm. I let each truth settle. You stopped being my son long before you shut that door on me. You are just a man who lived in my house. I turned my gaze to Jessica. Her perfectly manicured hands were clenched into fists at her sides. And you? You will leave the key to my husband's study on the kitchen island. Do not enter that room. Or what? Jessica sneered, a last vestige of her arrogance flaring up. "You'll what, old woman?" Mr. Chen took a half step forward, but I placed a hand on his arm. This was my foundation, to secure. "Or," I said, my voice dropping even lower, making them lean in to hear it, "the evidence of your systematic abuse, the fraudulent power of attorney, the bank statements showing Ethan draining my accounts, the story of the illegal land acquisition that built your father-in-law's reputation and your own tech CEO image, and a certain recording of your post-sale plans. All of it becomes public record. Not just on the internet, Jessica. I'm talking about federal investigators, the IRS, the kind of attention that doesn't go away with a deleted post. Your world will not just crumble, it will be erased." The fight drained out of them completely. It was like watching two buildings, already condemned, finally surrendering to gravity. Defeat was a foul taste in their mouths. They were bankrupt, not of money, but of lies. There was nothing left to leverage, nothing left to hide behind. 24 hours, I repeated, turning to walk away. The clock started the moment I walked through that door. I didn't watch them any longer. I walked, with Mr. Chen by my side, out of the living room, leaving them to drown in the wreckage of their own making. I didn't need to see the aftermath. I had designed this final, painful renovation, and I knew its conclusion. The next morning, I did not return to the house. I sat in a small cafe miles away, nursing a cup of tea, watching the world go on. I imagined the silence in that house. A different kind of silence now. Not peaceful, but tomb-like. The ugly, frantic silence of defeat. I pictured them moving through the rooms, not speaking, the air thick with unspoken accusations. Every object they touched would feel like it belonged to someone else. The art on the walls would mock them. The light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows would seem to expose them. When the 24 hours were nearly up, I had Mr. Chen's young tech-savvy assistant, Maya, drive me home. We parked across the street, watching. There was no drama, no shouting, just a quiet, humiliating exodus. Ethan, his shoulders slumped, carried a designer suitcase to the trunk of his Tesla. He moved like an old man, all the youthful vigor and arrogance stripped from him. Jessica emerged next, her face a pale, grim mask behind oversized sunglasses. She didn't look at him. They moved around each other like hostile strangers. Then came the children, Leo and Chloe. Their faces were not filled with the cruel laughter I remembered. They were sullen, confused, their eyes darting around as if expecting judgment from the trees, the sky, the very pavement. They were just children, I realized, stripped of the toxic power their parents had bestowed upon them. They were passengers in a crash they had helped cause, but could not comprehend. For a fleeting moment, I felt a pang, not of pity for them, but of sorrow for the goodness that had been coached out of them. They climbed into the back of the car without a word. The last to leave was Jessica. She paused at the driver's side door and looked back at the house. My house. Her gaze swept over the clean lines, the perfect marriage of glass and stone and redwood that Robert and I had poured our souls into. It wasn't a look of longing or remorse. It was a look of pure, unadulterated loss. The loss of a prize, a trophy she had almost won. Then she got in, the door closing with a soft, final thud. The car pulled away from the curb, followed by Ethan's, and they disappeared down the street, two separate vehicles heading toward two separate fractured futures. The gate slid shut, and then there was only silence, the real kind, the peaceful kind. I waited a few more minutes before I got out of the car. I walked up the driveway, my own driveway, and used my own key to open my own front door. The air inside was stale, holding the faint, cloying scent of Jessica's perfume and the lingering energy of their despair. I walked through the rooms, my hand trailing along the walls. The house felt vast, empty, and quiet. It was no longer a prison. It was no longer a battleground. It was just a house, waiting. I went to the basement, to the windowless room that had been my cage. The cot was still there. I didn't touch it. I went to the storage closet and found the box where they had tossed my life's work. My architectural awards, my blueprints, my old T-squares, and drafting pencils. I carried the box upstairs, into the light. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel glee. The victory was a hollow thing. The the satisfaction laced with the profound sadness of what my family had become. There was no joy in their destruction, only a quiet, solemn release. I was free, but the scars of the chains remained. In Robert's study, a room they had never dared to truly occupy, I wiped the dust from his old drafting table. I opened my box of tools. My fingers, which had trembled for months from stress and cheap medication, felt a familiar weight as I picked up a graphite pencil. I unrolled a fresh sheet of vellum paper, its clean white surface a stark contrast to the ugliness that had filled these walls. I wasn't erasing the past. You can't demolish a foundation of memories, good or bad. You can only build on top of it. I looked out the window, at the city stretching out below, full of homes, full of people, full of hidden pain and silent strength. And an idea, born not of revenge, but of purpose, began to take shape. The Robert Peterson Sanctuary, a place not just of refuge but of creation, a place for women to redesign their own lives from the rubble. My hand, once trembling with age and sorrow, was steady now. With a breath that felt like the first one of a new life, I touched the pencil to the paper. The first line I drew was not a wall. It was a doorway,